You could feel the tension in the air. When it occurred, the courtroom fell silent. Did he collapse in front of everyone? He was the king of hip-hop, the man who once controlled the entire music industry, and he established a billion-dollar empire. Security had to hurry to grab him before he hit the ground because his face turned pale and his body went lifeless. The reason for this was that 50 Cent had just revealed 2 decades of secret recordings that no one knew existed. For more breaking news and in-depth coverage of high-profile cases like this one, if you're new to the channel, be sure to like and subscribe. We bring you the stories that others are scared to share. This bombshell was not anticipated to be revealed today. It was meant to be simply another day of testimony, but the atmosphere in the room was already tight. The witness stand was the center of attention until Diddy began to struggle for oxygen. Even the judge halted as gasps reverberated across the courtroom. There was no warning, no announcement, just Sean Diddy Combs, panting heavily and having trouble breathing. Diddy had remained calm during the trial up until that point, appearing assured in spite of the grave accusations made against him. But something had changed. Perhaps he was finally crushed under the weight of the facts. The knowledge that his old acquaintance had been filming him for years might have been the cause. Perhaps it was the knowledge that his meticulously constructed image was going to be permanently destroyed. Whatever it was. Diddy had finished acting like he was no longer a famous person sitting there. He was there as a man who had established an empire on secrecy and quiet, and who suddenly saw it all fall apart in front of him. The courtroom wasn't ready for what would happen next, as he started to tremble in his seat, because 50 Cent's revelations on Diddy's parties, the alleged crimes, and the systemic abuse of power weren't simply explosive. It served as a reminder to everyone in the entertainment sector that secrets are never truly hidden. It began as any other trial day would. The journalists crouched in their assigned rows, lawyers muttered plans, and the room was alive with low-volume chatter as they awaited the next witness to be called. However, the room altered when 50 Cent was unannounced and added to the witness list. A pin could be heard dropping. Some believed it to be a PR gimmick, while others believed it to be an error. Everyone could tell this was true, though, by the way 50 Cent approached the stand with a hard-set jaw and a determined expression in his eyes. Did the judge, who had been silently consulting with his legal team, suddenly appear to have seen a ghost? He raised an eyebrow. He lost the color in his face. His hands, which had been taking notes methodically during the trial, started to shake significantly. Cent sat down at the witness stand and avoided looking at anyone. He did not even look. His eyes were wide with what appeared to be alarm, and he was sitting up straighter now. "I'm here to be honest. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time," 50 Cent started. Since what 50 Cent was going to say wasn't included in any media narrative, the court permitted it and the trial changed course from that point on. It wasn't a leak on social media. For almost 20 years, it had been meticulously recorded and kept. 50 Cent wasn't on the original witness list, and Diddy's lawyer immediately protested, alleging that his evidence wasn't relevant. The prosecutor calmly explained that fresh evidence had surfaced that directly related to the sex trafficking and racketeering accusations. The court dismissed the objection after a brief sidebar and told 50 Cent to go on. You could hear the air conditioner buzzing overhead in the eerily silent courtroom. In a gesture of support, reporters leaned forward in their chairs, held up Dowdy's relatives who had been at the trial, exchanged anxious glances, adjusted the microphone, and turned to face the jury. "I'm not going to tell you anything that is based on hearsay or rumors. It is based on recordings that I have been gathering since the year 2000. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Diddy's lead lawyer got up to protest once more, but Diddy stopped him by putting a hand on his arm. It was as though he was already aware of what was going to happen and had accepted it. Presenting a laptop and multiple hard disks as evidence, the prosecutor came forward. "Your Honor, 3 separate audio specialists have verified these recordings for us. They immediately support the testimonies of several victims and are authentic and unaffected." The court in this instance reviewed the evidence logs and gave his approval, so you can move forward. Cent inhaled deeply before starting to talk. Everything would alter with the next sentence. I've long kept a lot of things to myself. I've built my own successful music career, 50 Cent remarked. I've developed successful TV series and $100 million enterprises. However, none of that can conceal what I witnessed, what I went through, or who caused it. He leaned slightly toward Diddy's direction. You did. 50 Cent told the court that it began with what appeared to be a formal invitation, as is common in Hollywood tales. According to their framing, it resulted via reciprocal links in the music industry. It was meant to be a chance to network at one of Diddy's well-known parties. Being asked to attend one of Diddy's parties was a huge deal to me because I was still a newbie to the profession. I didn't question it because I had heard about similar parties previously. However, 50 Cent realized something was wrong as soon as he stepped foot in the Hamptons property. The property was enormous, hidden behind high hedges and gates, and guards were on duty all around, inspecting phones at the entrance. Strange nervousness was in the air. Conversations taking place a few feet away were drowned out by the volume of the music as soon as he entered. The first warning sign should have been the cameras he saw disguised as home decor. It felt like they didn't want just anybody to see what was going on inside, even though they claimed it was for security, to protect the celebs who were there. He was eventually shown around the party's more elite sections. There were fewer individuals inside the house the farther he got. At certain doorways, security personnel were stationed to verify names against lists. Someone seemed to be observing all the while. After a few hours and a few drinks, Sense mentioned that. Diddy came right up to him. He made a statement along these lines. In this field, I make the decisions about who succeeds and who fails. That is understood by everyone here, and he grinned. It wasn't hot. At the time, it was ownership. After the shooting that almost killed me, I was still establishing my profession. 50 Cent went on. I wasn't going to be subdued, but I also wasn't in a position to oppose someone of Diddy's might. That night, I did something that I continued to do for the next 20 years. I began to videotape everything. He described how he started out with tiny voice recorders concealed in his clothes, and then progressed to more advanced equipment as it became accessible. I had no particular purpose in mind for these recordings. It was self-defense. There would be proof if something were to happen to me. The judge inquired as to whether 50 Cent had gotten the persons he recorded to give their approval. Only one person needs to agree to a recording in New York, where the majority of these recordings were done, and I did. Furthermore, these were not private discussions. Diddy's lawyer claimed that the recordings were inadmissible, citing privacy regulations because they were private actions taking place in public areas with dozens of witnesses. The prosecutor argued that privacy issues were superseded by the fact that the recordings showed criminal behavior. The judge took into account both arguments and decided that the recordings could be played, but only those that were directly related to the criminal charges were sent. He explained that 3 months prior he had given federal investigators 100 hours of recordings after seeing the surveillance footage of Diddy abusing Cassie in the hotel hallway. What I had seen for years was validated by that video. The situation wasn't unique. There was a pattern. The prosecution was getting ready to play the first recording, which was made on August 2, 2003. Diddy started to sweat visibly. He took a glass of water from his lawyer and drank it with trembling hands. There was nobody in the courtroom ready for what they were going to hear. The courtroom speakers started playing the first recording. Daisy's voice was clearly audible, even if the audio was a little muted due to background music. No one leaves until I tell them to. No one refuses me. You get it? A scared-sounding female voice answered. Please. All I want to do is return home. Diddy's voice once more. When I'm done with you, you'll leave. This is how it operates. This was recorded at an after-party after the MTV Video Music Awards in 2003, according to 50 Cent. When I heard this, I was in a side room. It was one of Diddy's friends who had brought the model to the celebration. He was preventing her from leaving when she tried to do so. Another recording, this one from 2007, was played by the prosecutor. Better audio quality allowed Diddy to be heard clearly. "Everyone in this room is mine. I can break you as easy as I formed you. Don't put me to the test." 50 Cent recognized a number of the background voices as those of well-known musicians who were signed to Bad Boy Records. This occurred during a studio session. Someone had questioned Diddy's creative approach, which infuriated him. He lost his temper, endangering not just their professional future, but also their personal security. 50 Cent described the background of each recording as it came on. There were talks about how to deal with those who had betrayed Diddy, about what seemed like payoffs to keep victims quiet, and about overt threats against anyone who may come forward. In a 2012 recording, Diddy talked about having a freak-off scheduled for the next weekend, making sure that everyone's phones were gathered, getting the standard supplies, double the quantity from the previous time, and making sure that everyone signed the NAS before they entered. A different voice inquired, "What about the distinguished visitors?" Diddy answered, "They have no choice. If they choose to continue working in this town, they follow instructions. Every time a new recording is made." Diddy appeared to get physically smaller in his chair. As the pattern became apparent, the judge overruled each of his lawyers' repeated objections that the tapes were being taken out of context. The most incriminating recording was made in 2016, a few weeks prior to the Cassie Hotel incident. "She's becoming too independent, thinking she can make decisions without me," Diddy's voice could be heard saying. "I must remind her of the authority." A second male voice answered, "How will you proceed? Whatever it takes." "I have too much on her for her to ever leave," Diddy replied. "She is aware of the consequences for those who disobey me." As this recording played, there was utter silence in the courtroom. A number of jurors flinched. The lawyers for Cassie who were in the courtroom looked at each other and took notes that were explained. "I was at Diddy's place for a private dinner. Only roughly 6 persons were present. He was freely discussing Cassie, who wasn't there. I was wearing a recording device. I was aware that a negative event was imminent, but I was unsure of how to prevent it." The prosecutor inquired, "Have you ever attempted to alert Ms. Ventura?" "I attempted to communicate with mutual pals," 50 Cent answered. "Did he, however, have her so secluded and under control that no one could communicate with her? Additionally, I was worried about what he may do if he discovered that I was attempting to assist her." As more recordings came on, a timeline of growing threats, manipulation, and control over almost 20 years became apparent. The recordings, which provide audio proof of actions that had previously been attested to but not recorded, supported numerous claims made by earlier witnesses. Midway through the record's presentation, Diddy's breathing became labored. He was now red instead of pale. His lawyer, looking worried, begged the court for a short break as he undid his tie and whispered something to him. "Your Honor," began the lawyer for Diddy, "my client's health is not good. We ask for a brief respite." The judge started to answer when Diddy abruptly got to his feet, stumbled, and fell. As the courtroom descended into turmoil, court officers hurried to his side. 50 Cent stayed on the witness stand and watched passively as Diddy, who had once been one of the most influential people in the music industry, lay unconscious on the courtroom floor while the judge called for order and instructed the bailiff to leave the room while medical assistance was called. When he did the next day, the court reconvened. Diddy was there, but he was very quiet. According to medical records, he experienced severe stress and dehydration, but he recovered sufficiently to proceed with the trial. The court rejected his legal team's request for a delay, saying the case would proceed as planned. To complete his testimony, Cedar was sent back to the witness stand at 2E. He claimed that when he followed Diddy into a private section at another event in 2009, believing they would talk about a possible business partnership, he was completely taken aback by what he saw. Some of the young ladies I recognized from music videos appeared to be barely aware. A few were uneasy and scared. Was he the only one who saw and recorded everything? He was controlling the entire situation as if it were the most commonplace thing ever. He stopped and swallowed hard. The point was that I didn't know how to get out. You're in once you're in. Days after that incident, 50 Cent's voice remained steady yet lifeless. The voice said, "I received a blocked number call. Keep your mouth shut, Wasim. I know you saw." They hung up, saying, "If you want to stay relevant." Until a parcel reached his private home, he believed it to be a meaningless threat. It had no markings. There was a USB drive inside. I looked even though I nearly didn't. It was that night's video. I was there in the background, but I don't recall entering that room or being videotaped. Diddy's voice could be heard saying something behind the camera. "I've got something on all of you now. Family is like that." According to 50 Cent's testimony, the fear he felt at that precise time was unlike anything he had ever encountered. "I became aware that I was not invited to the gathering. I was initiated." At this point, he clarified, he started to document everything that happened around Diddy. It was no longer only for me. I was aware that some victims lacked a voice, strength, or means of retaliation. I believed there would be a reckoning if I gathered enough proof. Additional tapes from 20 to 2020 were played by the prosecutor. Each one showed details of Diddy's purported control over colleagues, workers, and artists. Discussions about hiring private detectives to gather information about possible threats, blacklisting individuals who had declined to take part in freak-offs, and giving security staff clear directives to prevent specific individuals from attending events were all discussed. Diddy was heard saying in a 2014 recording that having money is insufficient. You can take money away. Being famous is not enough. Notoriety wanes. Having an impact on others around you is what counts. That's true power. Taunt described how this way of thinking influenced all he did. Success was not his only goal. He desired to own others. He wanted them to be afraid to turn against him. The prosecutor inquired about specific instances in which Diddy was accused of controlling or victimizing other celebrities. 50 Cent mentioned a number of well-known musicians who had either been the target of Diddy's manipulation or had seen it happen and kept quiet out of fear. It was more than just his actions. 50 Cent gave a statement. Making sure everyone understood he could harm them as well was the goal. Stories would spread about people who were abused, blackballed, or suddenly unable to get employment. No one felt safe because of the environment of terror it produced. In his own words, he explained how Diddy would combine charm, generosity, and subliminal threats to keep people faithful. He would buy you pricey presents, take you on lavish vacations, and make you feel important before casually bringing up someone who had betrayed him and ended up with nothing. It was always a clear message: you might be here. Conversations regarding certain situational handling that supported the criminal case's accusations were also audible on the recordings. To preserve Diddy's reputation, there were talks of bribing possible witnesses, erasing evidence, and planning lies. Several jurors were clearly agitated as this portion of the hearing went on. After collapsing the day before, he took copious notes while sitting still, looking straight ahead, and speaking to his lawyers every now and then. Cent explained why he had been silent for so long as he wrapped up this section of his testimony. "I was constructing my own defense and proof. I was aware that I would be destroyed if I spoke out against his word alone. I needed indisputable evidence, which is why I watched the hotel footage of Cassie getting beaten. I was aware that anyone could have betrayed him at any point. I could have been that person." According to 50 Cent, the manipulation in his own career started at that point. More invitations to Diddy's activities would be sent to me. I said no. Radio stations abruptly stopped playing my music after that. I lost contact with people I had worked with for years. Online, there were rumors that I was hard to deal with, paranoid, and envious of Diddy's success. I was aware of it. Pressure was the cause. Diddy said it without having to. He simply stated that the price of peace was silence. 50 Cent claimed that for years, he carefully gathered information while keeping a safe distance to protect himself. He dismissed rumors of their rivalry as friendly competition, maintained a smile throughout interviews, and concentrated on creating his own empire outside from Diddy's grasp. However, each time I came across a news report about someone else voicing their opinions, I wondered why I was still silent if Cassie, the male producer who filed a complaint, and everyone else were talking. He surveyed the courtroom. Did he not simply destroy people's careers? I ultimately came to terms with the fact that 50 Cent made them afraid to speak the truth. Courtsent leaned closer to the microphone, hesitated, and looked at the jury. The recordings weren't the only thing. He claimed that was the leash. He felt as though there were strings linked to everything he did after that. He clarified that he would receive calls from a variety of middlemen who would advise him to go to specific events, work with specific musicians, or make investments in particular companies. He said that if I declined to attend one of his parties, things would change behind the scenes. The next week, I would learn that I had lost a sponsorship agreement or a movie job. This became a pattern rather than an isolated incident. Did he not need to intimidate people? Label executives, club owners, radio station managers, casting directors, and other systems took care of everything for him. He was skilled at making chances disappear as quickly as they appeared, and at making problems materialize out of thin air. 50 Cent was questioned by the prosecutor regarding a particular instance in 2018 when his TV program Power encountered unforeseen production difficulties. Our planned filming venues abruptly disappeared, equipment rentals were canceled, and actors received other offers. Getting back on track took months. Nodded, sent. After I refused to allow Diddy to executive produce the show, I later learned that he had contacted a few network officials. I'm unstable and difficult to work with, he informed them. Everything I had built was almost destroyed by that one lie. These remarks further enmeshed the courtroom in a conflict that lasted for decades and was fought not just in contracts or headlines, but also in the shadows of power. In response to Diddy's covert sabotage, 50 Cent described how he started to create his own route, one that would be impenetrable and unbreakable. He said, I had to create something different, something he couldn't manage. Thus, he ventured out into independent projects, television, and alcohol. For survival, not only for success. The tape then appeared. With horrifying clarity, Diddy's voice cut through the room in a 2019 tape that was shown to the court. He believes that he is now untouchable. However, no one is untouchable. No one. There was silence in the courtroom. 50 Cent disclosed that the threat had never gone away, even though Diddy had shifted attention to smaller targets, those with less money or power. He asserted, he never forgot that I disobeyed him. He understood what the Cassie lawsuit meant when it was made public. He went on to say, that was only the first crack, it wasn't the beginning. There were many others, people who were too afraid to talk. So why now, the prosecutor asked. Why bring out these tapes now, almost 2 decades later? His tone became softer, because my silence was no longer acceptable to me. He described how everything changed when he saw a grainy hotel security tape of Diddy assaulting Cassie. I didn't want to accept that. Then I got a call from someone I trusted, declared that they would bury it, that Diddy's team was in motion already. At that point, the floods began to flow. Reliving years of memories, threats, broken artists, and lost careers kept him up all night. He continued saying, I was a witness to a machine, and I had evidence. I wasn't just a bystander. And so he called. To the FBI, to be honest, I informed them that I had recordings dating back 20 years. You have it, and you want it. He looked at the jury. I became complicit by keeping quiet. I waited. He was aware that I was waiting. Then he caught sight of Diddy. You were fully aware of what I was doing. Then he moved closer with the judge's approval. All eyes are on Diddy. He spoke steadily. Out of fear, you created an empire. You referred to it as mentoring. You referred to it as family. The bad boy way, as you put it. It wasn't a label, though. It was a jail. Diddy sat quietly. His attorney quickly whispered in his ear. 50 Cent, however, did not recoil. He reached into his pocket and took out a small, antiquated flip phone. This was my first recorder, he said, pointing to it. 2003. Just before I noticed your actions. I kept it as a reminder of the consequences of unbridled power. If you think this case is about one party or one video, you're missing the point, he said, turning back to the jury. This has to do with a system designed to keep predators safe and their victims quiet. Then, one last time, back to Diddy. You used to say, "I can't be held down by anyone." The truth can, after all. He took the witness stand once more. Be calm, unfazed, and bided their time to be released. Diddy was still nowhere to be found, pale, stiff, trembling fingers. The room was no longer his for the first time in decades. One more question was posed by the prosecutor. Do you think Sean Combs poses a risk to others, Mr. Jackson? Without hesitation, was the response. Yes, as long as he is protected by people, money, and power. He still has the mechanism that made it possible. The victims remain terrified. Then, anarchy. Diddy abruptly stood up. His body tensed, then fell to the ground. The eyes rolled back, unconscious. People in the courtroom gasped. Police hurried in. The paramedics came next. His lawyers gathered around him in a panic, and he was put on a stretcher and taken away. Word quickly spread outside. A crowd gathered. Questions were shouted by reporters. However, 50 Cent did not smile as he left the courthouse. He made no gesture. He just strolled, his head held high, yet his shoulders weighed down by the stillness of 2 decades. Do you think justice will be served? Exclaimed a journalist. At the car door, he paused. I don't have that choice. The jury will decide that. Then he vanished. The courthouse was still trembling within. The judge appeared frightened as well. A few jurors dabbed at their tears. For the first time, Diddy was at a loss for words. He spent 3 days in the hospital. Citing medical ineptitude, his legal team requested a mistrial. They rejected it. With or without him, the trial would go on. Stories of high blood pressure, panic attacks, and psychological stress were published by the media. It was real, according to some. Some called it strategic. The outside world, meanwhile, responded with anger and dismay. There was a quiet crisis in the music industry. Meetings for emergencies, campaigns that have been paused, CEOs' carefully crafted remarks, which were once proudly associated with Diddy, are now filled with concern and surprise. However, hypocrisy was not tolerated on the internet. Previous interviews surfaced, unsettling images, long-forgotten accusations that unexpectedly gained significance. The silence era is over. Diddy reappeared for the trial, but he was slimmer, more reserved, and not dressed like the multi-billionaire he had been. The presence of his family has diminished. His mother and 1 son were all that were left, and there was more to the question that lingered above it all than the guilt of a single individual. It was the extent to which this system would accompany him.